and the dawn with the flower, and actually there are 3 dawns I had to get, and a couple of sunsets I had to get. And so I had to be in really specific places at those times.
And you said you've done other documentaries. Mm-hmm. How does this, what are the titles of the other?
The other one is Vidas Entretejidas, or Woven Lives. And it's about weavers in Oaxaca. So it's in the same valleys. There's a lot of the same villages that I went to. There's 2 new ones in here that were not in that. And there's a couple that were in that are not in this one, but some of the same people and some of the same, some of the weavers that were in a chapter were there. We saw their altars in their homes in here. So there's some overlap, but it's sort of like telling story about the same place, but sort of the life and the culture. And even the exhibition will be a little bit more how the textiles tie into it and how the weaving and the embroidery work tie into it. So. But it does, like, it happens over all these days. And man, it's crazy. Like, that was, I would have, I don't even know how, I would get maybe 4 hours of sleep for about 4 days in a row. We would be and my videographer too, the 2 of us went to everything. The other people on our crew sometimes came along, sometimes didn't, depending on what we needed. But we would be up at 3 in the morning going to one village, go straight through to another village, going to the market with them, stay through, maybe get back to the hotels to sleep, but, for an hour or 2, and then back out again at 3 in the afternoon until 1 in the morning. And that happened like 4 days in a row. So it was pretty. Yeah, I was. Yeah, do you have a question, Paul?
I was wondering, you were saying that it's only 24 hours and other parts of Mexico.
Well, see, it's kind of 24, yeah.
Like you say, it varies from just that region of Oaxaca a lot.
Yeah.
You go to northern Mexico.
Well, it takes place over multiple days, so yeah.
Usually November 1st is the day of the Santos Inocentes, for the kids. People that died with no sense. And then November 2nd is
a different, right.
And then the day before that, October 31st, is the day of the people that died in accidents, like violent.
Yeah.
So there's like 3.
Yeah, it's multiple days, and they call it Days of the Dead, which I went back and forth whether to call it that or not. And a lot of people just call it Los Muertos. They don't even say Days of the Dead. They just say Los Muertos. Yeah, it's the whole thing. Yeah. But it is, and it varies a little bit. There's always a 24-hour period where the dead come back. The certain family members come back. But there is the kids' day ahead of time, and there's this other thing, and it does stretch out over multiple days for sure. Yeah, it's similar there, yeah. So I should clarify that when I explain. It's like the 24 hours with like your specific ancestors is usual. That seems to be fairly standard from places I went, that it's 24 that they come and then they go. But there's stuff that happens, there's the kids' day before, and yeah. I didn't know about the accident day. They might do that too. I mean, there's just a lot.
I don't know much about Oaxaca. I've seen all these celebrations. They change, for example, the colors of the flowers. They're more subdued for kids. They use white flowers.
For the kids.
So there's all these variations.
Exactly. Exactly.
How the flowers are used, when you use them, like all these codes of, if it's a kid, you can't miss having, I can't remember what.
Something or the other, yeah.
But if it's an adult, you have to have salt and water, and you might know that too. Like there's very specific things that you can't miss in an album.
Yeah.
But it varies also.
Exactly.
The water is to pure, no, the water is to quench your thirst from your journey, the journey. The salt is for purifying.
Huh. No, I didn't see any salt in anybody's altars.
So it must be a variation from Central Mexico.
Right.
Central Mexico has all these.
Yeah.
And the yellow of the marigolds also means something. I can't remember what, and the red of the other flowers.
Yeah.
But so sorry. Going back to.
No. I think that's what's really interesting is that not only you can't just say here's what they do in Oaxaca, and you can't just say here's what Mexico did or here's what Day of the Dead is. It's different not only in Oaxaca, but like a town that's 15 minutes away from the other one. It's quite different. And if you go to a different part of Mexico, it's totally different. You go down to Guatemala, it's completely different there. So I'm trying this is this story about this space because it can be very, very different in another. Yeah.
Speaking of variation, I was very curious to know if there's any celebration happening at home. You say that they go back home, and what I experience is that you honor your dead in the cemetery, but also you have food to offer
Mm-hmm.
at your home.
Yeah.
Because your members of your committee will go honor the respect to your dead ones by going and visiting your house. So everybody's visiting everybody.
Yeah.
So you go, and that's why it's not private.
Right.
Doors are wide open.
They leave the door open so the dead can come in. Mm-hmm.
The doors are wide open, you walk in, you pay your respects, you greet the family. And if it's a recently deceased person, of course, it's much more emotionally charged. But rather than someone like that.
And that's another chapter in this, is the one in the homes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, yep, there's food.
It's all about sharing, because it coincides with, I don't know exactly what happened, but with the cosecha.
Mm-hmm. Harvest.
With the harvest.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of abundance because it is harvested.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
one question for you. If everybody's traveling, who stays at home to receive the other people?
It's everybody's taking turns. It's a big family.
Yeah.
You leave your grandma, you go.
Oh, okay, the grandmother's doing those.
Or the grandmother might go and mom's home for a while, but there's usually somebody in the home, and they open the doors during that, again, like in Teotitlan, which is the town that I'll do the visiting in the families, because that's really huge. A lot of the altars that we saw were in homes, and and I have one that's like from what the altar normally looks like, because they usually have an altar anyway. But then what do they do for Day of the Dead, and how does that change? And then they open the doors for that 24-hour period, and you walk around with these, piles of bread and fruit, and you go out, you come in with a big cloth, and you put stuff in it, and you walk off with your, it's like Christmas when we all go to everybody's house. Everybody exchanges food, yeah.
So that was my question. So it does
Yeah,
happen also.
totally, yeah.
So if I made tamales and you made mole, I give you tamales and you give me something, whatever it is.
Yeah, it was in where we went. It was more like, and also you set the table. You have these big feasts. You have you leave an empty chair at the table too. Like for Passover, you leave it for Elijah, and then for in the Day of the Dead, you leave your seat empty for the dead to be able to sit with you. They tended to in Teotitlan, that was where I was doing the house to house thing. The tamales and the mole would be there. But you would bring bread and flowers, and you put the flowers first, and you put the bread on top of it, and then you saludar, you greet the ancestors, and then you go greet the people in the family. And in the small towns, you walk around and shake the hand of every person in the room when you come in, and everybody when you leave. And so, but doing that first to the ancestors was really super important. So usually the tamales and like the mole would be there, but the bread would go back and forth, and then there's fruit and nuts, and everybody walks home with food, and everybody has like one shot of like the refrigerator full of Coca-Cola, Coronas, and tamales, because it's just lots of food. Everybody feeds each other, but it is interesting. Like there's some similarities and some slight differences, and I think what I hope to do from this is to point out enough similarities to make people realize there isn't one way that this happens, and there's certain things that kind of run across and themes, but it's quite different one place to another.
What time do they start eating?
Depends which town. It's 12 o'clock in Mitla. It's 3 o'clock, or it's about 4 o'clock. In the dead come at 12 o'clock. I guess you eat around 1 o'clock. In Mitla, in Teotitlan, it's at 3 o'clock. The dead come around 4 or 5. You eat, but then you have another party the next day too, and in the morning. But there's a lot of food, a lot. It's a lot like Christmas. Some do. They do here. There are some people like cooking. People bring their little barbecues. It depends. But in Mitla, they wouldn't do that. At Tsompa, they do. And at Tsompa, they would have little fires going. There's people like selling food outside, and then they might even like be cooking something because they're there all night and it's cold and you get hungry. So they would be eating there in San Antonino, where they're spending a lot of time. That's the one where they're using lots and lots of flowers on super decorated graves. You'd see people a lot eating, playing cards, because they're also there. It might take 5 hours to decorate a grave. You've got to eat. And so they're just doing whatever. They got the radio playing, you know. And that was the one thing about the music too, is like it's not, the music's whatever. It's not like here's Day of the Dead music. It's like, well, we like Leela Downs, you know, and these guys over here like somebody else. And so there's crazy music all the time, and it's always playing. And it'll be different if I'm on that side of the room from this side of the room. It might be something totally different that everybody's just sitting around. It's like you're at a picnic, you know. So.
And you're not playing, are you going to have part of the, like, the background music? Or that was happening?
When we were, then that was one thing if I wanted to know if you guys caught, is actually other than the very first song was one I put in there, and the very last song was one I put in there. Everything else was taped on site, what they were playing. That DJ was there, and they were playing the music, and I didn't know if that, did you catch that? Was that obvious, or do I don't know if I need to put that, but that was what it sounded like. I did not put that music in there. That's what they were playing on their, you know. It's crazy. And you really would have these like really quiet, serene scenes with the candle and the woman with the shawl. It's cold. You put the shawls over your head because it's cold. And so you're sitting there and there's this beautiful scene next to the grave and the candles. And then they're playing like Pollito con Papas, which means chicken with potatoes. That's the song they were playing. You know, and it's like crazy wild in the background. There's, you know, salsa music or whatever, you know. It's fun. Yeah. Yeah. So curious from that, if you have a few minutes, and if you have to go, that's okay. But so from the chapter, what did you all, what'd you get from it? Does anybody want to give us, like, what were your overall, like, takeaways from it? What'd you get from it? What did it tell you about? You think Amy got that?
Oh gosh, no.
Yeah.
You can do that in like half an hour.
Sorry.
I was just thinking just not only the picturesque beauty, but also just the beauty of the relationships, you know, and the caring of, you know, people for one another. That was nice.
Nice. Yeah.
I thought, yeah, it was beautiful watching it, but I thought there was something missing. I thought, well, where's the dialogue? You know, what was the purpose of this long scene? You know?
Without words. That's interesting.
I really like just like receiving it without getting any guidance. Like just experiencing as if I were there.
I thought it was more powerful without words, because there were a few sentences which capture the meaning, and then, I don't know, I thought it was moving.
And I thought that the ending really brought it together with like that breath. It kind of felt like, and then the eyes closing, it kind of felt like that was the dead and that they were there for the experience, and then like that last breath is like, it's like a experience that can go back and wait for the next experience.
Yeah.
I thought, you know, there was joy at the beginning of people coming in, you know, they really look forward to this, and it's very meaningful for them. And then as they're leaving the cemetery, it's almost like this, you know, they're done, and it's sad that they're leaving for another year. And I didn't see the words either.
A celebration of life,
Right.
basically, more than that. So it was, I liked it a lot.
Oh, good. That's what I'm hoping to get to. But you know what I think is happening when I'm sitting here looking at it and talking. You know, I've got my editor and that we're going back and forth on things. But you know, there's what I experience, and then there's what you all experience. And since I want other people to experience, I need to. You know, it's really helpful to know, to hear those things. And as it were, Alberto, you started to say that.
I really liked it too, and for me, what struck me the most is that the Deep Mexico. That's the title of a book by a Mexican anthropologist, Mexico Profundo, that he really studied these deep layers of Mexican traditions, and that, for me, Deep Mexico is well and alive in the era of globalization.
It is, isn't it?
very interesting.
Yeah, and you'll still see the effects of globalization. I mean, they got Coca-Cola out there. They've got little LED. There's some guy in a big rabbit suit with LED light. They like the LED lights. Those show up. Jack-o'-lanterns, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They do that in Mexico, but it's for the, in Guatemala,
Uh-huh.
where they dress up like bunnies and stuff.
Oh, do they?
But that's not for the daily day, it's for something else.
For something else.
But my comment was, they just had the Spring Film Festival here
Uh-huh.
in Madison. I don't know if you saw anything like this.
I didn't get there. Yeah.
One of the choices was Stray Dogs.
Uh-huh.
And they actually had a scene where a lady was looking at a picture of a mountain, and the guy comes up behind her and stands. He's her husband. 14 minutes, nothing changes.
Oh, really?
So you have just one long shot, 14 minutes, and then everybody's wondering what's going to happen after the 14 minutes. You sit there and you wait, and then it's the end. The script comes up.
Wow.
It was very disappointing.
So don't watch that. Don't do that one, right? That's interesting. Because you think something's going to happen. Yeah.
I loved it. I thought it was great what we could see if like
Uh-huh.
two classes. But I love the colors and I love seeing the kids.
Yeah.
It's so fun, and I think I like it without the words. I think you really get the feel of what's happening. And I think that's like part of the most impactful aspect of it is that you feel everything.
Mhm.
You don't have people talking or saying it. You just feel it.
Mhm.
And that it can go from the different parts, so like in the morning and at night, and you get that different feel.
Yeah. So you got this, you could tell, like, I was trying to play with those first words, how to start it. So you knew this was starting like at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. And then by about 10, people are starting to show up. But that then they're there like all night. That was something that at first I wasn't getting across, that this was an all night thing. So that was also why we had to do the dawn shot there too. And so that was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say that I didn't miss the words either, and it was a very short 8 minutes.
Oh, good. Because if it was a long 8 minutes, then I'll be in trouble. That's good.
Make you compromise with the song.
Yeah. Like Pollito con Papas, that's one where it's like, man, it was so good if you know what they're saying. Yeah. So any other last questions? Or
What's your next movie?
I don't know. I'm doing some fair trade things next that I don't know what that's going to wind up doing, but I love doing stuff like this, the storytelling. And then I like really the interaction of the space and the storytelling and the textiles and how that becomes part of it and how you can tell a different story. Like, I think it will be really different when it's projected. Then it will almost be like two different things, I think, when it's projected in the gallery and when it's shown separately, because they're so, one is so time-based because you're sitting there watching this thing. It's linear because it's in a row, time-based in the film. But once you put it in a space and it's happening and it's not time-based, but it's space-based, so you're moving through it. So I think there'll be two very, very different experiences. It's sort of like I kind of had the film and I was like, wow, if I project this, that'd be really cool. And then it adds this whole other thing. And I was also thinking it could be really nice for things like if there's big festival, if somebody's having a festival, it could be good to just project on the wall in the back, because if you didn't pay attention, even if you only caught like a minute of that in the middle, I think you would find enough intriguing to watch it. So I'm thinking it can live in several different ways. And so, one is sort of, it has to be intriguing enough in beginning to end to hold people there for like 50 minutes. But it also has to be, if it can live if I can do it without the words and the visuals are really strong, it could also live in other ways too, where it's just projected and creating an atmosphere for some festival. I'd love to see it like really big on the side of a building.
One last question about
Yeah.
making the film.
Yeah.
Do you create the film first, or and then look for funding, or do you get funding and then create? Because you said you had a crew of maybe 3 or 4 people.
Yeah.
So it costs money. And
Yeah, well, I got grants through the university to do them, and that's how I got the first one, and it paid for much of it, but not all of it. And then I had a lot of people work really cheap on these films. My videographers give me a really good deal, and my editors give me a really good deal because they like the projects. And like the music, I've been able to get like internationally known artists to let me use their music and things like that. So I can keep the costs down more than most, and partially because it's more educational. I'm not looking to make $1 bazillion off of it. I'd like to pay myself back from the last film, but apart from that, it's I'm not. And so people will add into it, and they bring things to it in a way that keeps the cost relatively low. And because I went through it once before, I had a sense of how to do this. But we do have a big major grant opportunity every year at the university, and if you can write a really good grant proposal, you can often get enough to start a project. And it gives me enough to get them started, and then I often have to look for other funding on the side to be able to finish them up and go with them. But I go with a general idea of what I want. Like these, I knew what story I wanted from each place. And then, like now, I'm working on the other chapters as well, and I'll go through the clips. And so I knew which things I wanted to shoot. And then by the second year, I had a tighter idea of like, I need that flower at dawn, And I knew which one it wanted, but I didn't know the first year that I needed that. But then now I'm going through all my clips. I have a couple thousand clips from the 2 years, and I'll go through and look for the specific shot, and I'll do screen capture and put it into a PowerPoint. So I actually have all of these in a PowerPoint, and then I send that to my editors, and I say, use this clip and this clip and this clip in this order. This needs to take 3 minutes and goes with this song. And then they put it together, and we send it. This is version 11. It goes back and forth a lot. There'll be a 12 or 13 by the time it's done. What's that? No, I teach textile and apparel design. So, but I have I'm an artist, and I have my MFA is it's in textile, but I also do a lot of installation in my work. I actually had a little bit of a 5-minute video as part of my MFA show, which is the first place I did that. But I've worked with filmmakers on different projects, and it's sort of like it was sort of like the first one was sort of like doing PowerPoint presentations, like this one that I was doing. If I didn't have the film clips, I would do a lot of things like that about the artisans that I worked with a lot. But when I was talking to a filmmaker at one point, realized if I could do this on film, I can have their voices instead of mine, and I can show how the shuttle moves instead of explaining it. And so it's kind of and then I work with editors that are technically really good, and I can give them my ideas. So I'm like the creative director and the producer and the writer of all these, but I have technical people that know how to make the clips work and know how to get the different shots. My videographer is amazing, because we would come in and shoot something, and I'd say, I know I need this angle of this thing, especially on the first film. I need this angle from this thing because I want to know how this loom works, and I want somebody to look at it and be able to see how this thing's made. But he would take it in this gorgeous shot, and then he would take another way, but moving around this way. So then when we got to the editing, and I'd be sitting in the room with the editor, we'd know that I can take the way the shot moves in or focuses in and out, back and forth. I can use that for storytelling. So I have kind of my MFA gave me some information about storytelling in a space, and this is sort of storytelling in time, so I guess it's kind of self-taught, but not really, because I'm working with really skilled people. So that's it. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Was there any special textiles that they use for this celebration, or do they prepare anything?
Not much, because I was looking for it, because that's like, I wanted to tell this story, and my background's in textiles. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Though there's a lot of cut paper. There's tons and tons of cut paper. That's all over the place. But then also those great big sand paintings, they call those tapetes de reina, which are like sand rugs. So they call those rugs, and they think of them the same way as we would have a rug on the floor. Also, it depends on how you define textiles. Like when I think of textiles, I think it's multiple units of things put together. So like those, and that's how I've always thought about them. And so for me, like those people that are putting the little flowers together, that's like totally a textile. They're just stuck together through a background instead of stitched. But the concept of multiple units coming together is very much like a textile approach and a textile way of thinking about things. And so that all fit really well with that. But even the whole project, the whole thing is sort of like a big textile, because it's not like one monolithic thing. It's like all these people doing their individual parts, but it's the totality of all of them that makes it really powerful. It's not, and it's not a top-down thing. It's very much people expressing themselves naturally, but it's in a specific area on this grave or in the house or whatever. And as a unit, what it makes the whole is greater than, well, it is the sum of the parts, right? And to me, that's what textiles are about, but that's a whole other lecture too. So she'll let you go, I'm late for class. Thanks. And if you'd like to participate in the thing at Edgewood, there's some business cards back there. It has the website. And on the website, if you go to the page, there's some page about the exhibition, and there's a little form you can fill out, put your name and that you're interested, or if you want to do it with some group you're affiliated with, just write that in, and then we'll let you know as soon as the boxes are ready for pickup.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Stimulated me.
Oh, good.
Yeah, do you have a card?
I do. I have cards back there. Okay. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I've got a presentation.
So if you can kind of get your seat. There is a sign-in sheet that's traveling around, so I would ask that you would please sign in when it comes your way. Good evening. My name is Barbara Nichols, and I'm the Dane County President of the Dane County chapter of the United Nations Association. The Dane County chapter is one of 125 chapters across the United States that advocates on behalf of the United Nations programs dealing with social justice and humanitarian activities. In Dane County, we do three things. We have a program series where we provide lectures, which you're participating in this evening, that deals with global issues that sometimes have local impact. But the idea with the lecture series is to raise your awareness and understanding about
For all these days, and man, it's crazy. Like that was, I would have, I don't even know how, I would get maybe 4 hours of sleep for about 4 days in a row. We would be and my videographer too, the two of us went to everything. The other people on our crew sometimes came along, sometimes didn't, depending on what we needed. But we would be up at 3 in the morning, going to one village, go straight through to another village, going to the market with them, stay through, maybe get back to the hotels to sleep, but for an hour or two, and then back out again at 3 in the afternoon until 1 in the morning. And that happened like 4 days in a row. So it was pretty, yeah, I was. Yeah, do you have a question, Paul?
I was wondering, you were saying there's only 24 hours in other parts of Mexico, and it's rather...
Well, see, it's kind of 24, yeah.
Like you say, it varies from just that
Yeah.
region of Oaxaca a lot.
Yeah.
You go to northern Mexico.
Well, it takes place over, and the dawn with the flower, and actually there are 3 dawns I had to get, and a couple of sunsets I had to get. And so I had to be in really specific places at those times.
And you said you've done other documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
How does this, what are the titles of the other?
The other one is Vidas Entretejidas, or Woven Lives. And it's about weavers in Oaxaca. So it's in the same valleys. There's a lot of the same villages that I went to. There's 2 new ones in here that were not in that. And there's a couple that were in that are not in this one, but some of the same people and some of the same, some of the weavers that were in a chapter were there. We saw their altars in their homes in here. So there's some overlap, but it's sort of like telling story about the same place, but sort of the life and the culture. And even the exhibition will be a little bit more how the textiles tie into it and how the weaving and the embroidery work tie into it. So, but it does, like, it happens over.
Your thirst from your journey, that journey. The salt is for purifying.
Huh. No, I didn't see any salt in anybody's
So
altars.
it must be a variation from Central Mexico.
Right.
Central Mexico has all these.
Yeah.
And the yellow of the marigolds also means something. I can't remember what, and the red of the other flowers.
Yeah.
But so sorry. Going back to.
No. I think that's what's really interesting is that not only you can't just say here's what they do in Oaxaca, and you can't just say here's what Mexico did or here's what Day of the Dead is. It's different not only in Oaxaca, but like a town that's 15 minutes away from the other one. It's quite different. And if you go to a different part of Mexico, it's totally different. You go down to Guatemala, it's completely different there. So I'm trying like, this is this story about this space because it can be very, very different in another, yeah.
Speaking of variations, I was very curious to know if there's any celebration.
Multiple days, so yeah.
Usually November 1st is the day of the Santos Inocentes, for
Uh-huh.
the kids,
Uh-huh.
people that died with no sin. And then November 2nd
Is
the
a
Day of
different,
the Dead.
right.
And then the day before that was October 31st, the day of the people that died in accidents,
Mhm.
like violent.
Yeah.
deaths. So there's like 3.
Yeah, it's multiple days, and they call it Days of the Dead, which I went back and forth whether to call it that or not. And a lot of people just call it Los Muertos. They don't even say Days of the Dead. They just say Los Muertos. Yeah, it's the whole thing. Yeah. But it is, and it varies a little bit. There's always a 24-hour period where the dead come back. The certain family members come back. But there is the kids' day ahead of time, and there's this other thing, and it does stretch out over multiple days for sure. Yeah, it's similar there. Yeah. So I should clarify that when I explain. It's like the 24 hours with like your specific ancestors is usually, that seems to be fairly standard from places I went, that it's 24 that they come and then they go. But there's stuff that happens, you know, there's the kids' day before, and yeah. I didn't know about the accident day. They might do that too. I mean, there's just a lot.
Actually, I don't know much about Oaxaca's work.
Uh-huh.
I've seen all these celebrations and stuff. They change, for example, the colors of the flowers. They're more subdued for kids. They use white flowers.
For the kids.
Like the blue ones.
Uh-huh.
So there's all these variations. There's codes.
Exactly. Exactly.
How the flowers are used, when you use them. Like all these codes of, if it's a kid, you can't miss having, I can't remember what.
Something or the other, yeah.
But if it's an adult, you have to have salt and water, and you might know that too. Like
Yeah.
there's very specific things that you can't miss in an album.
Yeah,
But it varies also.
exactly.
The water's too pure, the water's